The moon was a dying ember over the smoking ruins of Harrenhal when the raven arrived. Its wings rimed with frost that did not melt even in the ember's glow. Jon Snow stood beside the half-collapsed godswood, its lone heart tree weeping red sap into the lake of cinders, and cracked the shard of ice glass tied to the bird's leg. Within the crystal, letters gleamed, a message scribed not in ink but in frozen flame, a language Bran had once whispered of, the speech of the others, carved by wind and night. Jon pressed the shard to the light. Shapes burned. "We have your dragon." For a heartbeat he could only hear the groan of Harrenhal's stones settling into themselves. The Night King had Viserion already. To claim another. The thought felt like a blade under Jon's ribs. The raven flapped once, scattering ash. Behind him, Daenerys Targaryen raised her eyes from the body of a Dothraki scout, laid out in a bier of shattered spears. She looked like a ghost herself. Silver hair streaked black with soot, cheeks marked by tears of ash that the wind would not carry away. Drogon circled high above the ruined towers, wider than the night itself, his roar the only heart left beating in the riverlands. Jon clenched the ice glass until blood welled. "He means Drogon," he said. His voice felt raw, as if the Night King had reached down his throat to tear words free. "He wants you to come." Daenerys stepped across the rubble. Dragonfire had fused stone and iron into glossy slag beneath her boots. She took the shard from Jon's bleeding fist and read, eyes blazing as the words faded into mist. When the letters were gone, she crushed the glass in her palm until it sang like a dying star, scattering fragments that steamed upon contact with her skin. "He shall not have him," she whispered. "I will burn the world before I yield Drogon." Yet the world was already burning. Southward, the riverlands were carved open by winter, villages swallowed beneath sudden blizzards that moved with minds of their own. Northward, the wall lay split by a wound, a league wide, where Viserion's icy breath had melted ice into steam and then frozen it again into jagged blue crystals, a gash of horrors from which the dead poured in glacial tides. Eastward, ships crewed by corpses, sailed the Styx-black waters of the Bight, silent except for the creak of ropes twined with human sinew. Westward, fields once golden with summer wheat stood white beneath husks of snow that buried the harvest and the harvesters alike. And in the very heart of it, the trident where rivers met, the Night King waited. Harrenhal was ashes because Daenerys had come too late, striking only after the dead had claimed the fortress labyrinth of tunnels and the living within. Worse still, Drogon's fire had slain nearly as many allies as White's, for the dead fought without fear and the living panicked beneath the dragon's shadow. Jon feared the banners of men were fraying faster than the frozen wind could tear them. Now the greatest banner, the last hope bound in scale and flame, was threatened. If the Night King turned Drogon as he had Viserion, 2 ice dragons would darken the sky, an unstoppable pair twining frost and death across Westeros. "We must go," Jon said. Daenerys did not answer at once. She looked toward the east, where dawn struggled behind walls of cloud. "I hatched Drogon in smoke and salt," she said softly. "I walked through fire to claim him. He's more than my child, Jon. He is my heart." She closed her eyes, and for a moment, her lips moved as if reciting a prayer to gods long dead. To lose him. Jon took her hand, the scent of ash and blood between them. "You will not lose him. We will not let that happen." Across the yard, Tyrion Lannister emerged from the broken hall, bearing parchments salvaged from the maester's chambers, before the fires swallowed them. His face was smeared with soot, hair singed. "Your graces," he called, voice hoarse. "There is a complication." He unrolled a map scorched along the edges, revealing rivers traced in ink as red as gore. Near the trident, Tyrion tapped a sigil scrawled in black, a dragon skull wreathed in midnight flame, the Night King's mark, branded upon villages abandoned to ice. Every road to the Trident is clogged with dead. Scouts report the king beyond the wall has raised a bridge of frozen mist over the water itself. If we march an army, we perish before we see him. Daenerys folded her arms. Then we do not march an army. Drogon and I will be expected. Tyrion cut in. He's baiting you, my queen. If you fly alone, you give him exactly the prize he seeks. 2 dragons turned, not one. Jon nodded. We need another way. Something he does not foresee. At this, a new voice drifted from the limping archway of Harrenhal's upper tower. Bran Stark, carried by Meera, her breath white in the chill, looked upon them with eyes milky as moonstone. There is a way, Bran said, calm as still water. But it will cost more than any of you wish to pay. The courtyard fell silent, but for the crackle of dying fires. Bran's wheelchair, fashioned of weirwood and dragonglass, bound with bronze runes Sam Tarly had translated from Old Valyrian, gleamed where the embers touched it. Jon knelt beside his brother. Tell us. Bran's gaze flicked beyond Harrenhal, beyond the world. In the hour when Viserion fell, I warged into him. I tasted the Night King's power. His magic binds the living to his will through ice that is not ice. Shards of the true long night, the blackest cold drawn from the void between the stars. If such a shard pierces Drogon, the same doom will follow. But the bond is vulnerable. It can be broken by dragonfire mingled with weirwood sap, fire of life and memory. Daenerys frowned. Wirewood burns like any wood. Yet its sap remembers, Bran said. The trees drink the songs of the children, the passing of men. When their heartwood burns, it calls to every root in the world. We must bleed a living weirwood, mix the sap with Drogon's fire, and strike the Night King before he completes the turning. Nemsawa. Tyrion raised a brow. An elegant theory, Lord Bran. All we need is to convince Drogon not to roast us before the sap ignites, and persuade a weirwood to bleed willingly, and somehow deliver this alchemical miracle across an army of the dead. Simple. A strained smile ghosted Bran's lips. Jon wondered if the boy he'd once known lingered within the cold knowledge of the three-eyed raven. We will have help, Bran said. From many places. He turned to Jon. Ghost has returned. Jon's pulse quickened. He had not seen his direwolf since the snows swallowed the north. Where? 8. The Isle of Faces. Bran's eyes clouded. He guards something the Night King fears. A memory older than either of us can fathom. Daenerys stepped forward. Hope glimmering. If that isle hides power great enough to frighten him, we must reach it. Indeed, Tyrion muttered, peering at the map. An island in the middle of the Trident, just downriver from the Night King's encampment. The irony is almost poetic. He traced routes, lips pursed. We'd need a small force swift, boats with black sails by night. Davos, Jon said. Tyrion nodded. No finer smuggler left breathing. Daenerys glanced skyward. Drogon's silhouette cut the dawn like a wound. We will divide our strength, she decided. Jon and I will fly Drogon to the Isle of Faces. Bran will guide us with his sight. Tyrion, gather those we trust and sail under night's cloak. Davos will helm. We meet upon the isle. And me? Asked Arya, stepping from the shadow of the godswood, face speckled with snowflakes that refused to melt. Needle hung at her hip, Valyrian steel dagger concealed within her sleeve. Jon felt a pang of alarm. He had not seen her slip into the ruin. You will stay safe, little sister. Arya's smile was all wolf. Safe? When the Night King hunts my family? I have danced with death before. She looked to Bran. Name the cost, brother. I will pay it. Bran's lips trembled. He will know you. The Night King remembers the face of every Stark. If you approach unseen, the chance to strike comes only once. Arya's fingers brushed the dagger's hilt. Once is enough. Thus were the pieces set upon a board of ice and blood. By twilight, 6 black galleys slipped down the green fork, banners hidden, oars muffled with cloth, soaked in pitch. Davos Seaworth stood at the prow, wind snarling his gray beard. Eyes narrowed for shoals of the dead that sometimes surfaced like drifting kelp. Beside him, Tyrion huddled in a cloak too large even for shadow, muttering calculations of time and tide while chewing lemon-soaked strips of dried rabbit to keep seasickness at bay. Gendry Baratheon hauled cargo of dragon glass arrowheads, Missandei of Aneith mixed flasks of lamp oil, and crushed red candles, said to bear Arlor's blessing. Ser Jorah commanded a small detachment of unsullied volunteers, their spears tipped with glass and fire. Across the dying sky, Drogon swept north, scales flickering ember red against clouds bruised purple by dusk. Upon his neck sat Daenerys in furs spun with silver thread. Behind her Jon clad in blackened chain, Longclaw strapped across his back. When Drogon beat his wings, the world seemed to fall away, leaving only wind and dread, and the stinging memory of all they might lose. Below, winter's breath scrawled runes of frost across rivers, each line twisting toward a frozen maelstrom at the Trident's heart. There, the Night King marshaled horrors. Giants with arms crystallized like quartz, wyverns wrought of bone and ice, a second dragon circling, Viserion his once golden eyes now pits of starless blue. Each time Viserion screamed, Jon felt it in his marrow, a pulse of despair that rattled the soul. As Drogon neared the Isle of Faces, Bran's voice whispered in the swift, strange language of ravens, guiding them down through blinding curtains of snow. Trees older than kingdoms rose from the island's core, their bark pale as old scars. The weirwoods formed a ring around a mirror-still pool, leaves bleeding crimson onto water blacker than night. At the pool's edge, Ghost waited, massive as a snow bear, coat feathered with frost. When Jon dismounted, the direwolf bounded to him, pressing a muzzle beneath Jon's jaw, a wordless cry of relief. From the galleys, torches winked across the water. Boats made landfall, and soon the fellowship stood beneath the trees. Bran reached from his chair, palm pressed to the weirwood's heart. Sap, thick and luminous, welled around his fingers. He breathed a word older than speech, and the tree answered with a deep, moaning crack. Sap flowed, gleaming like molten ruby. Daenerys approached, the vial Missandei offered in hand. "Will the tree survive this?" she asked Bran. Bran's eyes glimmered silver. "Its memory runs deeper than wounds." He nodded. "Take what is needed." They filled 3 crystal flasks. The sap smoked where it touched air, and the weirwood leaves rustled as though sharing ancient gossip. Night fell hard. Across the Trident, horns of ice brayed. The Night King moved. Sudden blue light lacerated the sky, Viserion's breath. The air froze so swiftly moisture shattered into diamond dust. Waves iced in place. From the far bank, a bridge of rime shot forth, forming in silence, stretching toward the isle. Upon it marched ranks of dead, wights bearing axes chipped from glacial cliffs, armor of blackened chain ringing with frost. Their eyes glowed no brighter than dying stars, yet their lines unbroke, endless. Arya vanished into the trees. Tyrion swallowed. "I hate it when Bran is correct." Jon drew Longclaw. Its pale fire shimmered. Beside him, Daenerys mounted Drogon. "We buy her time," she said. They had prepared quickly. Gendry had forged harnesses of dragonglass barbs to fit Drogon's throat and shoulders. Missandei had sealed sachets of weirwood sap oil to those barbs. When Drogon breathed fire, the pouches would burst, mixing flame with sap in a torrent Bran claimed would burn cold enough to unmake ice itself. Jon strapped himself behind Daenerys, vial of pure sap tied near his heart. Bran spoke only once more. "The Night King fears memory. Fire forged with memory can end him. But beware. 2 dragons will circle you in darkness. If he pierces Drogon with ice, all is lost." The roar of the dead was closer now, an avalanche of voices without throats. Jon squeezed Daenerys' shoulder. "Fly." Drogon leapt. Wings beat thunder. Below, Davos ordered flaming arrows loosed. The first ranks of wights fell aflame, yet corpses behind clambered over burning bodies. From the bridge's far end, the Night King strode, resplendent in armor of mirror ice. In his left hand he held a spear of frozen void, its point swirling with the dark at the world's edge. Viserion shrieked, diving from storm clouds. Blue flame crashed into Drogon's path. Daenerys banked hard. Heat like midsummer met cold, like deepest moonless winter. Steam exploding so violently Jon's ears rang. He glimpsed Viserion's ruined throat glowing cobalt, holes where flesh had sloughed away revealing bone lit from within by unnatural crystal. Then came another roar, softer, mournful. Drogon, facing his brother, bellowed a challenge that shook the clouds. Below, Ser Yoras Unsullied held the island's shore, shields locked. Whites hurled themselves upon spears tipped with glass, shattering like brittle resin. Gendry lit catapults, launching barrels of oil near the base of the ice bridge, flames sprinting across frozen water. But new frost formed faster than fire melted. As the dragons danced, Arya sprinted unseen along the twisting ridge of the ice bridge. Her boots had been coated in ashes to mask her heat. Her breath was stilled by a strip of silk across her mouth, lest vapor betray her. She slid between whites, as silent as the shadow of a passing cloud, dagger glinting but once beneath moonlight. Ahead, the Night King's back shone. Drogon wheeled down. Jon hurled a flask. It shattered against Viserion's wing. The sap ignited where Drogon's flame struck, and for a breath Viserion's scream became confused, agonized, as though memory flooded ice. The blue of his eyes flickered, gold ghosting beneath. The Night King paused, turned, sensed the threat, and met Arya's leap. Her dagger found a chink between mirror plates. Yet the Night King moved as if time were frozen. His spear caught her wrist. Ice spread along the blade, creeping toward her hand. She gasped, dropping the weapon. Daenerys saw, and dove. Drogon's flame poured in a torrent of crimson pierced with white sparks of weirwood sap. The Night King raised his spear. The flame struck, bathing him in living memory. For a heartbeat his eyes reflected faces. Children beneath sun-dappled leaves, first men dancing with stone-skinned girls, a pact of peace by a pool that would one day be this very isle. He staggered. Ice armor sloughed like melting candles. Yet he did not fall. With inhuman calm he speared Drogon's shoulder. A shard of void punched scale. Frost cracked across Drogon's black hide, blooming like death flowers. The great dragon reared, wings spasming. Daenerys felt a pulse of cold in his flesh. Turning began. Jon leapt from Drogon's back, bringing Longclaw down upon the spear's haft, shattering it. Black ice embedded deeper. Drogon shrieked. Frost climbed toward his neck. The Night King stepped forward, skin steaming. He raised a hand, ice swirling to form another weapon. Arya, kneeling in snow, snatched her fallen dagger with her free hand, the one she had learned to fight with blind. She spun, burying Valyrian steel into the Night King's calf. The blade drank blue light. Cracks spidered across his leg. Jon drew the last vial of pure sap. He smashed it against Longclaw's blade. Crimson, sap-coated rippling steel. With a roar he cleaved through the Night King's outstretched arm, severing it. Ice exploded into steam that smelled of pine and blood and sorrow. Viserion dove to protect his master, jaws open, blue fire roaring. Drogon, half his body glazed in frost, intercepted. Flame met flame. Where they collided, colors swirled. Azure despair against scarlet memory. The sky tore. Beneath the clash, the Night King staggered, one arm severed, leg cracking. Yet still he smiled, a chill twist of lips like frost on graves. He reached for the spear of void lodged in Drogon, intending to drive ice deeper. Daenerys landed, sliding down Drogon's neck. Her hand closed around the spear. Frost raced up her arm, but she did not let go. She thrust the shard not deeper, but free, yanking it out with a cry that flayed her lungs. White erupted across her skin, but she hurled the shard at the Night King's chest. The weirwood-touched shard pierced where Arya's dagger had cracked armor. Sap and void sang. The Night King froze. For a second, he and Daenerys locked eyes. Hers alight with living fury, his vast and bottomless. Then the shard ignited, flood of red memories pouring through cracks like molten dawn. The Night King screamed without sound. Blue flame guttered. Viserion faltered mid-air, wings beating uncertainly. Frost retreated from Drogon's flesh, leaving raw patches where scale had been but ice moments before. Jon shielded Arya as blinding radiance burst outward. From the Night King's heart to the furthest corpse, a wave of red-gold fire threaded with the whisper of ancient leaves. Where it passed, the dead collapsed, ice melted, and for an instant, every living creature heard wind through summer foliage, smelled rain on warm soil, tasted berries gathered in laughter long before kingdom or wall existed. The Night King shattered, first a crack, then collapsed into dust, swirling like snow and ember. His crown clanged upon the frozen bridge and dissolved into murky water that gurgled beneath cracking ice. Viserion spiraled, corpse freed of command. With a final mournful sigh he plummeted into the trident, steam roiling. Drogon landed upon the bridge's rubble, folding wings as if exhausted beyond mortal endurance. Jon pressed fingers to Arya's frozen wrist, warming her, while he looked for Daenerys. She stood near Drogon, frost melting from her arm, skin blistered but alive. Tears cut tracks through soot upon her cheeks as she stroked Drogon's snout. The dragon nuzzled her, purring like an avalanche slowed to a whisper. Behind them, Tyrion limped across the battered shore, gaping at the lifeless field of corpses melting to mist. Ser Jorah sank to one knee, relief plain as dawn on his face. Davos bowed his head, whispering a prayer to whichever god answered this day. Bran's chair was wheeled to the water's edge by Mira. He watched the river claim shards of ice armor drifting away. "It is done," he murmured, eyes distant. "The long night ends. For now." Jon approached, long claws stained with sap and starlight. "Will the dead rise again?" Bran shook his head. "Not while dragons fly and trees remember." He glanced at the pool where red leaves floated upon reflections of shattered clouds. But memory fades if not tended. Above, dawn finally broke. Gold spilled across the horizon, melting blue shadows that had felt eternal mere hours before. The Isle of Faces shone, trees glittering with dew that tasted faintly of salt tears. Ravens circled, no longer messengers of doom but announcers of a new age. Arya stood, flexing numbed fingers as warmth returned. "We should burn these bodies," she said, glancing downriver where thousands of corpses dissolved into slush. "Every last one." Davos coughed a rueful laugh. "Lady Stark, there's not enough oil in the narrow sea for that." "We have dragons," Arya retorted. Daenerys mounted Drogon again, the great beast's wings unfolding with renewed strength. She looked to Jon, who climbed behind her, and to Tyrion, Ser Jorah, Missandei, Davos, each bloodied yet alive. "We will scour the riverbanks," she declared. "We will free the realm from rot. Then we build anew." "Rebuilding is for masons and lords," Tyrion grumbled. "But as your hand, I suggest we start with wine and a very long rest." He surveyed the ruin of the bridge. "And perhaps a new map." Jon slid an arm around Daenerys as Drogon rose. He felt the dragon's heartbeat. Steady. Whole. Beneath them, Arya waved the Valyrian dagger in salute. Bran's eyes glowed with silent benediction. Ghost howled, a deep, rolling sound that seemed to call sunlight itself. When Drogon's shadow crossed the trident, the river glittered instead of froze. Ruins smoked, yet grass blades pushed through ashes impossible moments after flame, as though life rushed to fill voids the Night King left behind. Jon pressed his forehead to Daenerys' shoulder. "We keep the memory," he said quietly. She turned to him. "And guard it," she vowed. "With fire, with love, with every breath." Far away, in corners of Westeros not yet touched by war, children would one day speak of the night. Two dragons clashed in the storm and the sky bled red leaves. They would know winter can be broken, that even the darkest cold yields to a single ember of memory, tended by those who refuse surrender. For the realm had witnessed that ember made flesh, Drogon reborn of ice and sap and fearless hearts, and in his roar rang the promise that darkness may return. But so too will the dawn, so long as there is someone left, to remember the song of warmth. And on the Isle of Faces the heart trees whispered, their leaves forever crimson against the white of lingering frost. We remember. We remember. Aika. The embers of dawn still glowed along the eastern sky when an acrid hiss rose from the Trident's banks, where pyres of driftwood and broken shields stood taller than siege towers. Flamen tongues leapt high, fed by tar and wind and the resinous sap Bran had coaxed from the Isle of Faces. All night Daenerys had flown Drogon upriver to scour the dead-strewn floodplains, searing frozen flesh to ash. Now those ashes drifted like gray snow across the river's mirror, mingling with real flakes that fell from dull steel clouds. The stench of charred bone clung to every cloak and oiled breastplate, yet the taste of victory, all but unknown to these weary legions, carried its own wild intoxication. Ranks of unsullied stood silent vigil beside the flames, helms tucked beneath scorched arms. Dothraki, their harebells mute and melted, traced sigils in the soot before flinging handfuls into the fire, so that their slain brothers might ride the night sky. Westerosi banners drooped half-burnt upon lances. The dire wolf of Stark hung beside the three-headed dragon, both edges singed yet stubbornly intact. Jon Snow had lost count of the hours he spent tending the pyres. Each corpse he laid upon the timber felt heavier than the last, though the bodies were half ice. His own muscles seemed carved from lead and gilt. The pyre for Viserion lay at the water's edge, no mere heap of timber, but a hill of driftwood, and weirwood branches Daenerys herself had gathered from the isle. She stood now at its base, palms marred by splinters that refused to bleed in the cold, silver hair matted against her cheeks. Drogon rested behind her, chest rising in shallow, exhausted heaves. Frost scars cross-hatched his black scales where the Night King's shard had bitten. Beneath each scar mottled pink flesh lay exposed. Maester Walken had insisted those patches be dressed in poultices of pine tar and powdered dragon glass, but the beast would accept no healer save the queen. So Daenerys worked with mute gestures, stroking, salving, whispering songs in skirling Valyrian until the monster's tremors quieted. She looked up only when Jon approached, torch in hand. The hurt in her violet eyes startled him more than the smoke. You would light it, she said, voice raw. He was your child, Jon murmured. You're right. Viserion died twice. The first death I could bear, for I had hope he might live again in legend. The second, she brushed frost from Drogon's cracked scale and pressed her forehead to the warm ridge. This death leaves nothing to remember but a nightmare no mother should keep. She lifted the torch herself. The wind stole some flame yet left enough. When she touched it to the pitch-soaked branches, a line of fire crawled upward, caught and roared. Green tongues spiraled where weirwood sap met dragonfire, an eerie mix of life memory and fuel. Viserion's pale bones, glazed and fissured from his fall, gleamed beneath the blaze like river glass. The gathered armies bowed their heads, even ghosts seemed to hush. Bran's chair sat on a hummock of frost-dusted reeds beside Mira. His pupils, pools of moonlit current, reflected fire and something deeper. Every spark of him returns to the weirwood net, he said, voice barely louder than falling ash. One day, a hatchling in some distant dream may bear his name again. Jon remembered standing vigil by a different pyre at Castle Black, watched by men already dead and silent. Then he had fought the night for the living. Now dawn broke, and he still fought. Against emptiness, against the endless ledger of loss. He squeezed Bran's shoulder in mute answer before turning to survey the encampment. Tyrion approached with Davos at his side, both cloaked to their noses. The hand's right eye was pink-rimmed from smoke and lack of sleep. The old smuggler's beard sparkled with frost. Word from the scouts, Davos rasped, breath curling. Pockets of whites linger north of the twins, bound to no will, wandering like sleepwalkers. They avoid rivers, but our lads fear they may drift south if hunger drives. Hunger, Tyrion snorted. Never did I think the dead might starve, but there's poetry in it. He tugged a parchment from his sleeve. Also, ravens from Winterfell. Sansa Stark demands we return at once. Grain stores run thin, and the small folk expect the king in the north, if there still be such a title, to bring food, fire, and the heads of their nightmares. He angled a look at John. Strictly speaking, you quit that crown when you bent the knee, but northern memories cling like wolf fur. John nodded. We ride within the hour. Winterfell must know the long night has broken, or fear will rot what hunger spares. Daenerys joined them, expression tightening when Tyrion relayed the message. My armies march north, she said. Yet I will send wings ahead. She glanced to Drogon. The dragon's lids drooped, but a low rumble answered. He can bear me to Winterfell by dusk, if the air remains calm. Jon studied the frost still veining Drogon's wounded plates. Let him rest. I'll ride with the advance scouts in the morning and carry word. The north remembers my face. Some forget yours is not the Madkin's. At that, Tyrion cleared his throat. A point of strategy. Allow the dragon's shadow to fall over Winterfell first. Fear can soften stubborn hearts, provided hope arrives upon the same wind. And Daenerys shook her head. I have lived on the other side of fear all my life. I will not brand these people with it. If they cannot accept me save through fire and awe, then I am not the queen they need. Bran's voice drifted between them. Dreamlike. Your presence alone will test them. Let Drogon rest. You will walk through gates meant for men, not monsters. That path will bind memory to flesh more surely than flame. Jon caught Daenerys' gaze. A flicker of gratitude passed between them. Then we ride together, he said, and she nodded once. They set off at dawn, a column of 30 riders chosen for speed. Davos, Missandei, Gendry, a handful of Stark men, and 24 unsullied mounted on Westerosi Garons. Ghost loped ahead on silent paws, fur a pale blur through hard rime grass. Bran remained behind beneath Mira's watch, his ravens scouting the river valleys. Tyrion traveled by barge with the bulk of the host, steering supplies upriver. Jorah commanded rear guard, torching every corpse they found. Ice still filmed the shallows, but thaw spread with each league north. Snowbanks sagged under their own damp weight, exposing black soil. Where Viserions' ruin had seared wood to glass, crocus buds speared upward, yellow and defiant. The riders crossed deserted hamlets, whose thatch roofs sagged like broken backs, yet smoke ghosted some chimneys. The desperate had begun creeping home. They knelt or fled at sight of Daenerys, unsure whether to hail queen or witch, but her soft greetings and offers of bread coaxed smiles from soot-masked faces. Papers bearing the dire wolf and dragon sigils, promised grain once stores reached Winterfell. On the second night they made camp beside a tarn fringed by dead willows. Jon walked the perimeter, nerves taut, though the ghastly silence of white patrols had vanished. Daenerys joined him, cloak brushing his. You fear they will not forgive me, she said. Not forgive, Jon answered, understand. The North has long memories. They recall your father's pyres. She swallowed. I am not him. I know, but they must see with their own eyes. He paused, glancing over the frozen tarn at ghost moonlight. When the Night King died, I felt hollowed, as if a tether snapped inside. Part of me wonders whether we slew him or only cut one head from a beast with many. Naden? Her breath steamed. Bran would see if another rises. Would he? He warged into the Night King once. That touch left a scar. Scars ache most after the wound closes. She slipped fingers into his. Then we heal what we can until the ache fades. Jon looked down, surprised. Affection between them had grown in stolen moments, yet rarely so open. He squeezed back. Across camp, Gendry hammered a fresh edge onto an axe. Sparks flew, reflecting in Arya's eyes where she sat cross-legged, cleaning the blade of her Valyrian dagger. She caught Jon's glance, smirked, and mouthed, "About time." He reddened, but Daenerys laughed softly, tension breaking like thawing ice. They reached Winterfell, under a sky of pewter and bone. Smoke curled from every chimney. The castle buzzed like a hive of hornets, stirred but alive. Sansa waited upon the rampart flanked by Brienne and the Lord of Glover. At first sight of unsullied ranks beneath her walls she stiffened, but when Jon rode through the gate she exhaled. Ghost bounded ahead, scattering kennel hounds. Stark guards thumped spear butts and murmured, "Snow," with ragged relief. Sansa descended the steps, cloak of snowfox, fur billowing. She embraced Jon fiercely before turning to Daenerys. The two queens faced each other, one iced by northern air, the other tempered by dragonflame. Around them the yard quieted. "Queen Daenerys," Sansa said at last, voice level. "Winterfell thanks you for helping end the long night." Daenerys inclined her head. "And the Dragon Queen thanks the North for its courage. Without the Starks, dawn would not have come." "Mendawan." Sansa's gaze flicked to Jon's hand, resting on Daenerys' pommel. A flicker. Not quite suspicion, but calculation. The small folk have nothing to eat but turnips. Grain wagons have not yet crossed the neck. Lord Tyrion's barges follow, Jon assured. Stores enough for a fortnight will arrive within days. "And after a fortnight?" asked Sansa. Daenerys opened her cloak, revealing a satchel of maps. "We will plant winter barley in every field south of the wall, made fertile by thaw. Dragonflame can quicken soil, Bran believes." She handed the maps to Sansa Tar. "If you will trust me." Sansa scanned the parchment. Furrows plotted with draft lines, irrigation channels sketched like branches. Her shoulders eased a fraction. "Show me your plan in the solar." Jon smiled inwardly. He knew that shift. The moment Sansa shifted from opponent to partner. Daenerys' refusal to fly Drogon overhead had done more than any speech. Inside, they warmed by the hearth while ravens drummed on shutters. Sansa unfurled parchment after parchment. Supply manifests, planting schedules, a proposal to reopen the Wintertown smithies using dragonglass scrap as furnace fuel. Arya lounged on a window seat, boots muddy. Bran, brought late, stared into the fire as though watching centuries scroll. When Tyrion arrived 2 days later with barges groaning under grain and pitch, he found Winterfell's great hall hung with new banners. The dragon beside the wolf over a field stitched with green shoots. "A farmer's crown suits you, your grace," he quipped to Daenerys. She rewarded him with a tired grin. Yet peace proved restless. Reports trickled in of dead things still moving west of Last Hearth. The bones of giants half merged with ice, impervious to ordinary flame. Bran grew pale with each raven's tail. "I feel rifts in the weirwood net, where cold seeps like black ink," he told Jon one midnight. The Night King was but a vessel. The wound he tore at the heart of winter remains open. Jon frowned. Can it be closed? Perhaps. The source lies far north of even the lands men know, beyond the shattered frostfangs, at a weirwood frozen in eternal night. If we mend that heart, winter's poison will ebb. Bran's eyes glassed over. But the journey will demand more than dragonfire. It will demand memory carried by living blood. Word spread. Council convened. Daenerys paced the great hall's raised dais while Tyrion toyed with a wolf-carved goblet. "We just defeated an army of the dead," Jorah argued. "Now we're to march into myth pursuing a wound no maester admits exists." "Maesters once denied dragons," Missandei countered, "until one landed upon their rookery." Sansa folded arms. "The North cannot spare harvesters, let alone soldiers, for an expedition into Mirage. But nor can we abide another long night." Arya broke her silence. "Then send few, not many, those who walk through snow like ghosts." Her eyes glimmered. "I will go." Jon braced to refuse, but Bran spoke first. "You must, Arya. The weirwood heart murmurs your name, as it murmurs Jones, Daenerys, and mine." His gaze drifted to Gendry at the hearth. "Steel of Baratheon blood also." Gendry winced. "I'm no lord, but I've hammered dragonglass enough to forge new blades on the march." "Then no wand." "So be it," Daenerys decided. "A small company, swift and silent. Drogon bears me, Rhaegal's egg." She paused. Their last unhatched egg had cracked 2 nights past in the warmth of the forges, though no dragon stirred within, only a faint glow. "We," cannot wait for hatchlings. One dragon must suffice. Tyrion exhaled. An adventure beyond the map. Gods help us. Preparations consumed a week. Sansa issued fur cloaks lined with moleskin. Gendry melted shards of dragonglass into slender-tipped spears. Arya armed herself with throwing knives of Valyrian steel no longer than her fingers. Davos packed salt pork, dried ling, onions. Bran asked Mira to weave cords from children of the forest grass that never froze. Each cord he knotted with symbols none could decipher. The night before departure, Jon found Sansa upon the battlements. Snow glittered like powdered diamond on the parapets. Torches skirted the yard. "You would go beyond the world again," she said without turning. "Will you always chase death?" "I chase life," Jon replied. "If winter's wound festers, every hearth we've lit will gutter. You know that." She twined gloved hands on the stone. "I do, yet I just got you back." Her voice cracked, and he remembered how many times she'd watched him ride away. To the wall, to Hardhome, to Dragonstone, to King's Landing. He reached for her, but she straightened, mask restored. "Go then. Save us again. But when you return, choose a lord's life or a ranger's. One cannot be both." Jon smiled sadly. "I think I lost the ranger in me when I crossed the wall southward. And a king sits uneasy on these shoulders. Perhaps I will be simply Jon. Nandaro. Simply Jon may be exactly what we need," Sansa whispered. She kissed his cheek, cold lips hot with worry. They rode out through Winter Town as dawn bled rose along the eastern ridge. Children peered from thatched doorways, clutching carved wolves and dragons. Gendry hefted packs onto shaggy rounsies. Davos swore about frozen girths. Drogon crouched beyond the gates, wings mantled, tail sweeping drifts aside in thunderous crunches. Villagers gasped, yet did not flee. Memory of Viserian's corpse still haunted them, but the sight of one dragon killing another for their sake had tempered dread with awe. Brienne pressed a bundle of raven feathers into Arya's palm for luck. Tyrion offered Jon a small flask of arbor gold. For thawing courage, he winked. Missandei draped Daenerys' shoulders with a scarf woven of unsullied spear flags. "So those who never feared death will guard your throat." Bran reached to clasp each traveler's wrist. To Jon he murmured, "The song is old, but you will teach it new verses." To Daenerys, "Where fire touched ice inside you, keep that wound open. Through it, light enters." To Arya he said only, "Not today," and she smiled fiercely. They set north, following the King's Road until the mile markers disappeared beneath snow crust. Ghost ranged abreast, ears twitching at scents none could smell. The miles unfurled, abandoned watchposts, croft houses with doors blown in by storm, white owls perched on signboards. Days shrank to ghost-gray glimpses between nights that howled. At Queen's Crown they found a band of free folk led by Tormund Giantsbane, who embraced Jon like a bear, then frowned at the unsullied spears. "Thought the dead were done," he grumbled, "but the wind still stinks of them beyond the milkwater." Tormund insisted on joining, bringing 24 wildlings swathed in mammoth hides. "The far north is no place for silk skins alone," he told Daenerys, eyeing her dragon with grudging admiration. "You ride a furnace, but the frost there is colder than lies." Past the last river, the land rose wild. Spires of black granite raked the sky like broken talons. Forests of glassy pines creaked under rimes so thick the bark rang when struck. Here ghosts' hackles never settled. Whites no longer roamed in droves, yet strange shapes fleeted at the edge of firelight. Ice spiders big as hounds, ravens whose eyes gleamed red, not blue. During third watch, Gendry glimpsed a white shadow atop a crag, the empty armor of another, wind carving it hollow. At dawn they found the shards melted to water. On the 9th day, the wall's shattered remains loomed. A chasm wider than a river flanked by fangs of glacial rubble. Jon gazed up at the breach where he'd once led a doomed charge. Snow sheeted the blue scarp like burial cloth. Beyond, nothing moved. Tormund spat. Still, open wide as a whorehouse door. Drogon took to wing then, scouting. His roar echoed off the ruin like thunder. He returned with fragments of jagged ice crusted to his talons, remnants of frozen corpses fused into the wall, still writhing when he tore them free. Davos turned pale. Even Arya shivered. They followed a trail Bran's ravens marked, skirting the frozen shore. The aurora danced overhead, ribbons of emerald fire. At night, Bran's mind walked the Dreamweir into roots older than language. He guided them to a valley of perpetual dusk where snowflakes hung in the air as if suspended by unseen threads. Here grew a solitary weirwood taller than the wall ever was, its trunk sheathed in ice so clear the red heartwood pulsed within like a living ember. At the roots, cracks exuded black mist, a wound torn by the Night King when he was birthed from mortal flesh. The mist smelled of iron and starless winter. Jon dismounted, Longclaw gleaming pale. Arya and Gendry circled wide, torches dipped in sap oil ready. Tormund's wildlings formed a ring, spears outward, chanting a low dirge to giants. Daenerys, astride Drogon, hovered above, flame licking the monster's throat. Bran closed his eyes. "Remember," he whispered, "pour your living memories into fire. Where the past bleeds through the present, the wound will close." Daenerys and Jon stepped forward together. She spoke first. Soft Valyrian lullabies her brother once sang, names of children she freed in Meereen, visions of a broken wheel she swore to crush. Each word sent flickers of gold along the fissure. Jon followed, oath sworn at Castle Black, Ygritte's death kiss, Ghost's first howl, the shock of a blade in his own heart. The cracks quivered, exhaling black mist that snaked around their ankles, but did not freeze them. Arya flung torches into the gap. Drogon's first torrent of flame thundered down, but not red. An iridescent fire shot through with motes of weirwood, white and sap crimson. The flame sounded almost like voices singing. The ice screamed. Veins of night split, gushing shadow that writhed. The wind pitched. From the mist sprang spectral figures, faceless, genderless, armored in frost, wielding shards of pure dark. They rushed the ring. Wildlings met them, dragonglass spears passing through like smoke yet scalding that smoke into steam. Gendry swung a hammer glowing blue from cold. Each impact shattered an echo of memory. One specter soared at Daenerys on wings of broken light. Drogon roared a defiant challenge, but Jon, clinging to the dragon's saddle strap, leapt. He met the wraith mid-air, long claw cleaving. Sword kissed shadow, brilliance flared. He landed hard upon snow, bruised but alive, nothing left of the enemy but drifting embers. Yet the fissure drank the battle's fury. It widened, coughed deeper blackness. Bran's cords of grass fluttered as if in gale. He muttered strange syllables. Then Arya darted past him, dagger reversed. She plunged the Valyrian point straight into the tree's heart, piercing red wood through ice. The dagger's steel absorbed the ember glow and exploded in white radiance. Cracks stitched themselves shut from within. A bloom of warmth rippled outward. Thaw following in concentric rings, snow melting into rivulets that hissed as steam. The specters shrieked, twisting into ribbons of smoke that the wind unwove. The mist recoiled, sucked back into the closing wound. Ice plates sloughed from the trunk, shattering. Beneath, unscarred bark glistened as fresh blood. The valley brightened. The eternal dusk gave way to pale day. Far across the wastes, a boom like distant thunder signaled glaciers calving. Silence fell, broken only by Ghost's low growl of relief. Arya exhaled, shaking frost from lashes. Gendry steadied her. Bran opened clouded eyes. Tears of sap leaked down his cheeks. "It is done," he breathed. The heart mended. Winter will come as seasons do, not as doom. Jon helped Daenerys dismount. In her gaze he saw exhaustion and triumph mingled. He reached for her hand. She squeezed it, fingers warm despite the cold. Together, they studied the weirwood. Already new buds reddened the branches, impossible in such climb. Tormund slapped Yon's back. 7 hells, Crow. You keep strange company, but you get the job done. Davos chuckled weakly. Let's hope the south stays quieter. I'm too old for northerly miracles. Nemshas. The journey home felt lighter, though snow still lay deep. At Queen's Crown they found the lake thawed, covered in mist that smelled of peat rather than rot. Children of the free folk danced on the banks. Birds absent all winter returned in flocks, their calls bright. Ghosts chased them, tail wagging, the direwolf puppy-like at last. When Winterfell's towers rose into view 10 days later, they gleamed beneath clear blue sky. Farmers plowed soggy fields where crocuses now carpeted ridges. The sight stole Jon's breath. Daenerys turned to him, a question in her eyes. He answered with a kiss that drew cheers from riders and a mock groan from Davos. Inside the great hall, Sansa convened lords and smallfolk together. Bran was wheeled to a dais ringed by torches. He spoke little. None doubted his word as three-eyed raven. When he simply said, "The rift is sealed," a hush rolled through earthen-packed benches, followed by an eruption of applause. Sansa stood, raising a goblet. Winter's wound is healed by those who dared beyond the wall. Let their names be etched in stone and song. She listed each, ending with, "And let it be known the queen who brought dragons back also brought spring sooner than any maester foretold." A roar of approval shook rafters. Daenerys bowed her head. Snowfall of red leaves drifted through smoke holes, caught in her hair. Tyrion nudged a keg toward the hearth. "To hope's hangover," he toasted, and ale flowed. Spring accelerated. Riverrun thawed. Highgarden sent carts of seed. Even the Iron Islands pledged ships to ferry timber. Dragonstone's mines yielded obsidian not for weapons, but for plowshares tipped to cut frozen ground. Drogon nested in Winterfell's godswood, careful not to scorch trees. Children dared feed him goats. He accepted with surprising gentleness, as though memory of their gift bound him to protect rather than terrify. Jon often walked ramparts at dusk. No threat gleamed on the horizon now, yet responsibility pricked him like burrs. A duty to guide this fragile dawn into day. One evening, Daenerys joined him, cloak billowing azure. "The realm stirs to life," she said. "But lords mutter of succession and charter. They ask if the north will kneel or stand." Jon traced the curve of the battlement. "It will stand beside, not below. Our banners fly together now. Let each kingdom rule itself under a shared council. Not a throne, but a table." Tyrion called it a radical dream. But the lords tired of war conceded. They met at Harrenhal's rebuilt hall. Stone still pitted from dragonfire. To forge the Pact of Embers. 7 kingdoms, each free to choose its governance, yet bound by treaty to aid the realm against threats unnatural. A council of 9 seats oversaw trade and defense. 1 for each kingdom, plus seats for the free folk and the renewed order of maesters, charged with guarding memory. Daenerys chaired the first session, Jon at her right, Sansa at her left. Months turned. Crops sprouted. Frozen rivers flowed. Yet some nights Jon woke to wind rattling shutters, hearing distant screams of things no longer alive. Daenerys would calm him with whispered stories of Valyria's first spring. He, in turn, taught her northern songs. In these exchanges they built a language of shared dawns. One hazy morning atop the Godswood Hill, Bran summoned them. "Memory endures through circles," he said, eyes aglow. "The wheel you vowed to break still turns. Slower now. To halt it, seed new wheels." He produced 3 acorns the weirwood had shed, white shell, red vein. "Plant them where dragons once ruled, where conquest left wounds. Their roots will tie men to the past they try to forget." Jon carried one to the Blackwater Rush, planting it in the ashes of the dragon pit. Daenerys planted one at the Fields of Fire near Blackhaven. Arya took the 3rd to Braavos before sailing west on her next horizon. Each acorn germinated, leaves white as bone against crimson veins, a promise that memory, kept in living wood, would check ambition. The following autumn, Winterfell's godswood blazed scarlet. On the anniversary of the Night King's fall, horns echoed over the yard. People gathered. Free folk, northerners, Dothraki, Summer Islanders, even a small embassy from Korth. Bran blessed the new order beneath the heart tree. Sansa led children of every bloodline in a ring dance. Tyrion composed verses half ribald, half reverent. Davos read the Pact of Embers aloud. Dragons soared overhead. Drogon, and, to startled cries, a hatchling no larger than a horse, ebony wings, striped jade. The egg overlooked in Winterfell's forges had not been empty after all. Heat and memory merely took longer to coax it awake. Daenerys placed her palm on Jon's chest as they watched their children. Of flesh, of fire, of hope. Thrive. No subtitles for our story. She teased softly, recalling his promise the tale be told plain. Only living chapters. Jon kissed her brow. Then let's keep writing. The sun balanced on the horizon, gilding ramparts. Far north beyond the repaired wall, glaciers gleamed benign beneath gold light. Somewhere in those wastes, a weirwood hummed, its wound healed yet watchful. Beneath its roots, the Night King's crown lay buried, now a circlet of simple ice, harmless so long as memory endured. Ghost howled once, a note not of warning but of belonging. From the fields came answering cheers. The realm had tasted the brink of oblivion and chosen instead to remember, to carry the ember of dawn forward, reuniting seasons yet unborn. Thus spring's promise became summer's certainty, and the Night King's empire of silence was replaced by a chorus of voices. Stubborn, discordant, ever human, singing of a world that, though scarred, refused to forget the price of the sun's return. O, ka, o, hendi. The first snows of the second winter, after the long night, were gentle. A drifting curtain that whispered rather than howled, but the hush unsettled Jon Snow more than any blizzard had done. He stood atop the White Knife's rebuilt stone bridge, gloved fingers resting on frost-dusted parapets, and watched the river swirl below in muted steel spirals. Boatmen sang as they poled grain barges south. Fishermen checked eel nets strung like harp strings beneath the arches. Children skated in shallow coves already glazing. All ordinary, all thriving, yet wrong. The snowflakes carried no scent of bone-cold dread, yet his skin prickled as it had on the night the dead marched. A tremor in the river's song, a shadow where none should fall. Ghost padded beside him and whined, nose lifted, hackles half bristled. Jon breathed out a plume and turned north where dawn bruised the pale clouds. Somewhere beyond those hills lay Winterfell, Daenerys, their hatchling dragon still nameless, though stable hands called it Sprite for the giddy way it bounded through courtyard drifts. He should have been there, drafting the next sowing schedule with Sansa, yet Tyrion's latest raven had dragged him south. A terse line that the council at Harrenhal required a northern voice to settle Dorne's protest over trade tariffs. The matter had seemed trivial, until this snow began to speak of deeper unease, as though the world sensed fissures widening beneath its brittle calm. A horn blast echoed downstream. Jon's gaze sharpened. 3 quick notes, the river signal for danger. On the far bank, bargemen scrambled, pointing at something just under the waterline. Foam frothed black. The river's flow slowed, thickening, and then froze solid in a single sweeping ripple, every eddy locked mid-curl. Cracks radiated, spitting crystals across the surface. Fishermen's poles snapped. One man slipped and smashed his temple on the sudden ice. Jon vaulted the parapet, Ghost leaping beside him, both landing on the bridge's lower cutwater. He knelt, gloved palm brushing the new ice. It burned with cold, older than winter. Blue veins writhed beneath, faint but pulsing like heartbeats. Not the vibrant cobalt of Night King sorcery, a darker hue, almost violet, as though void swallowed starlight within. Ghost snarled. The veins retreated at the rumble, spidering aft along the current, sinking out of sight. Seconds later, the ice cracked apart, and the river rushed on as if nothing had happened, carrying slush downstream. Jon straightened, breath short. The wound is sealed, Bran had sworn. But Something still bled. He jogged back across the bridge and hailed the captain of the nearest grain barge, a leathery woman with one eye and a short bow. "Tell every dock east of the Green Fork to post lookouts. If the water flashes blue, beat your craft." She frowned but saluted. John signaled Stark riders to spread word along the roads, then dug into his satchel for parchment. A snowflake landed on the page and sizzled, leaving a perfect black burn hole. John stared, stomach turning, then scrawled hard. "Brand sightings of void ice on White Knife midday first snow. Ride at once." When the Raven launched north, the ache in John's chest only deepened. He needed Daenerys. Daenerys felt Joan's dread long before the Raven arrived, carried by the strange thread of awareness that had woven between them the night they closed the Weirwood wound. She paced Winterfell's library while Sansa and Tyrion debated decimal tallies of maize. Shelves groaned under new ledgers. Windows wept condensation over fur-lined alcoves. Quills scratched like quiet rodents. None of it held her mind. Drogon dozed outside the walls, his breath curling above Merlon's. But even his dreams were uneasy. She sensed the twitch of his tail, the restless flex of his frost-scarred plates. When the Raven thumped the slit, Bran wheeled forward to take it. Fingers trembling too much for knots, Mira slipped the note free. Silence gathered as Bran's eyes clouded the color of storms. "Something dark touched the White Knife," he murmured. Not the Night King's echo, deeper. His wheelchair creaked when he spun to Daenerys. "We bound one wound. Another now yawns in the river where cracks of history converge. Memory alone cannot mend this." Tyrion sighed through steepled fingers. "I did warn that wheels keep turning. Our pact of embers is still fresh ink, and already the world seeks new ways to bleed." He turned to Sansa. "Postpone the Harrenhal summit. Summon the Valley Lords here. If Jon felt this cold, so will the Vale by morning." Sansa snapped the ledger shut. Her cheeks flushed anger, but not at Tyrion. Again the North bears burden first. She glanced to Daenerys. "Your dragon may scorch it before it spreads?" "No." Bran's voice cut like a frost edge. "Flame banish winter's avatar, but this chill carries memory older than dragons. If Drogon's fire strikes, it may quicken the void instead. We must learn before we burn." Daenerys folded arms, fighting the urge to ride anyway. "Then we learn. But my heart says Jon will not wait." Bran's gaze unfocused, white seeping into his pupils. "He rides south already. To the Isle of Faces. The river calls him there." A tremor ran through Bran's limbs. "I must go too, through the ravens. I will meet him." Tyrion raised an eyebrow. "Your body cannot endure that journey in winter sleet. My mind flies faster." Bran slumped back, sweat beading. "Keep me near the heart tree. Mira will watch my breathing. If I falter, pour warm sap upon my brow." Mira nodded, jaw set. Daenerys swept from the library, cloak trailing like a comet. In the courtyard Sprite chased goats, wings fluttering. She whistled shrill. The hatchling skittered to her side, trilling. "Not you, little one," she murmured, stroking the jade-striped frill. "You stay safe." She turned to Drogon's mountainous form. "We fly." He roused with a graveled roar, frost flakes shattering from his chest. Stable hands scattered. Sansa hurried out beneath the archway, red hair aflame against falling white. "Daenerys, take care." No more protest. They clasped forearms, Queen and Lady of Winterfell, and in their grip a kind of unspoken pact of their own formed. "Hold the land while I guard the sky." Then Daenerys vaulted onto Drogon's neck, and they launched, snow spiraling behind like stars in their wake. Jon reached the Isle of Faces by dusk. He'd ridden Eric, a rangy gray courser bred in the mountains of the moon, and changed mounts thrice at Stark posts. Only Gendry kept pace, hammer-strapped, breath billowing. They crossed the causeway as storm clouds bruised the sky, and found the lake mirror-black, trees already moaning under early ice. Ghost bounded ahead into the ring of ancient weirwoods. As Jon dismounted, the direwolf halted, hackles erupting, teeth bared at the water. The lake's surface swirled inward, a slow whirlpool. Blue-violet light leaked from its center, casting eerie veins across the roots. Leaves shook without wind. A raven cawed. Bran's voice, thin but distinct, echoed through the canopy. "Step not into the glow." Jon scanned, but saw only ravens perched high. "Bran?" He turned a slow circle. Frost rimmed each god's eye, carved into trunks. Tears of ruby sap, frozen mid-track. The isle felt alive yet wounded. Gendry drew his warhammer. "Feels like forge draft before metal fails." Pressure building. The whirlpool widened. Water below turned to ice, rising in jagged spears, then melting again in pulses. Jon approached, lungs were out. Steam hissed off the grip, frosting his gauntlet. Bran's voice again. "Memory collides with unmemory. The river carries tales that never were, leaking through." Jon frowned. "Time?" Silence, except ripple. Then Bran's ravens took flight all at once, storming skyward. The air rang, a sound like distant bells played backwards. Gendry cursed. "What in seven hells is that?" A silhouette rose from the pool, a figure of water ice, shifting, indistinct. Where eyes might be sat, black voids swirling with pinpricks of crimson. It carried no weapon, only raised an arm as though beckoning. Ghost lunged, jaws snapping empty air. The water doubled, forming another shape, mirror image, like memories echoing each other. Jon's instinct screamed, "Wraith." But no wight he'd fought sprang from water. He circled, soared low, until the first shape's head tilted, and in the void of its gaze, Jon saw flickers of himself on horseback beside Ned Stark, though Ned had never ridden to this lake. Then glimpses of Daenerys burning King's Landing. A vision Bran once showed him, a fate that never came. As each impossible memory flashed, the shape grew more solid, ice whitening, claws sharpening. "Gendry," Jon shouted. "They're fed by broken histories. Don't let them finish." He swung Longclaw. The blade passed through the creature with a sound like pages tearing. Frost formed along steel immediately, creeping. Jon slammed the flat against a trunk to shake ice off. Gendry smashed the second shape, but water splattered and re-knit before it hit ground. Bran's ravens swooped low. "Bind them with true memory," Bran's voice insisted. "Speak what was, not what might." Gendry blinked. "I was a bastard smith who forged King's steel," he bellowed. The shape confronting him jerked as though recoiling, half its torso dissolving. Jon took the cue. "I pledged my life to the Night's Watch." The creature before him shattered waist downward. "I bent the knee to the Dragon Queen and fought for life." The head cracked, shrieking like shattering ice. Jon delivered a crosscut, and the remnants burst into mist. Across the pool, Gendry shouted more truths. His knighthood by Daenerys, his hammering the spike that pinned Viserion's wing so Arya could leap. Each confession peeled mass from the water wraith until it collapsed in ripples that calmed flat. The whirlpool stilled. The violet glow dimmed. Ravens perched again. Gendry breathed out. Sweat, fogging. Bloody sorcery. Jon gazed into the lake. He glimpsed faint shapes still swirling beneath. Scenes never lived, him crowning himself on the Iron Throne, Daenerys' ashes in King's Landing, Arya wearing Sansa's face. These were the might-have-beens Bran had spoken of. But now they remained trapped underwater, scribed only in reflection. A thunderous roar split clouds, Drogon descending. Wind hammered treetops as claws crashed onto shore. Daenerys slid down, eyes blazing. "I felt the chill across half the realm," she hissed. Jon met her in 2 strides, arms wrapping. For a moment, the world shrank to shared heartbeat. Then Bran's ravens cawed thrice. Daenerys released Jon and knelt by the water, tipping a vial of warm weirwood sap from her belt. She dripped 3 beads into the pool. They glowed gold, spiraled outward, sealing cracks of violet that veined the mirror. Bran's voice sighed relief. Jon turned to see a real Bran, riding Mira's barge across the lake. The girl rode hard through slush. Bran's face was gray. When he reached shore, he rasped. "The rivers will try to remember futures that were stolen. These echoes feed hollows left by the Night King's passing. We must sow living memories at each breach. Gendry rubbed stubble. So, every time some dark vision tries crawling out, we stand about confessing our life stories. Not confessions, Bran said. Acts of truth. We ground the realm to what it is. He coughed, chest rattling. But the river is only one vein. Seas, deserts, mountains, all may share this sickness. He looked to Daenerys. The larger the dream, the deeper the void it casts. Daenerys exhaled. Then our task is not done. She glanced at Jon. We should divide. A dragon can carry us fast, but Sprite cannot yet fly far. Drogon may lose strength if we dash from breach to breach without rest. Jon stared at the water's surface. Another future glare flared briefly. A talon-winged beast of ice flanked by undead krakens. He knew whose dream that likely came from. Euron's lost reavers still whispered of such monsters across the western seas. Memory or nightmare? Hard to tell. We can't chase every echo, he said. We need a way to bind the wounds before they open. Bran nodded. A weaving of roots and fire and song. The children once did so when the first men's axes gored the earth. We need their craft, lost in the deepest forests beyond the Frostfangs. Gendry grunted. Then we better find it. Daenerys looked up at Drogon, who hummed low. Dragons can scour land, but craft of roots lies beneath. We need both. North to the Frostfang caves, east to the forests of Masavi, south to the rainwood where ghosts of the children linger. She touched Jon's cheek. We part here. Jon's pulse hitched. No, wherever you go, I go. She smiled faintly. We vowed to carry dawn together. Dawn spreads in more than one direction. If we split, each path carries half our hearts. That's still stronger than void. She pressed her forehead to his, a silent promise, then turned to Bran. Cast lots. Bran plucked 3 raven feathers, 2 white, 1 black. Daenerys drew the black. East, Bran said. The rainwood calls the Dragon Queen. Jon drew a white. Northwestern caves, Bran murmured. Gendry the other white. Bran closed his fist. You two with Tormund will seek the sunken crypt of roots beneath the shivering sea's cliffs. Mira and I row south along rivers to plug breaches with sap until Tyrion can sail seed stones. Daenerys mounted Drogon again. She kissed Jon with frost-bitten lips. Teach the void our truest song. Drogon's wings hammered. Snow devils spiraled, and she was skyward, violet cloak snapping. Jon watched until the last ember winked behind clouds, then turned to Gendry. Pack light. We ride before dawn. Ghost licked frost from Jon's gauntlet. Somewhere between the heartbeats, Jon thought he felt Daenerys still, like a distant star tugging the tide inside his chest. East of storms and the rainwood slept under perpetual mist. Birds scarce ventured, and vines the width of an arm draped branches like serpents. Drogon's wings created thunder through the shroud, yet the forest barely stirred. Trees seemed to drink the sound and lapse dreamlike. Daenerys perched on a limb of a towering sentinel pine, studying glyphs scarred into its bark. Spirals, arrowheads, a broken circle. Missandei, who had insisted on joining from Dragonstone, knelt beside the trunk, charcoal rubbing parchment. Old tongue, she murmured. I can translate pieces. Root remembers water. And here, song mends marrow. Daenerys fingered the spiral. Bran's lessons returned. The children wove song through root and river. Somewhere here lay a well of that song. If she could find and bind it, perhaps the void in the rivers would close. She slid down vines to the forest floor where Sprite bounced, chasing luminous moths. Drogon snorted steam and settled to guard. They trekked deeper until mist parted around a clearing carpeted in blue moss. At its center yawned a stone well, dry, rim carved with more glyphs. Missandei traced them. Breathe memory, exhale tomorrow. Daenerys crouched. The well walls plunged into darkness, but a faint thrum rose. Heartbeat of the world. She inhaled, and images spilled around her. The Freehold's dragons screaming across the narrow sea, Rhaegar at the trident, silver armor gleaming, herself in a stapor lifting chains. Each vision knitted the next, flowing downward. She realized the well-held living memory exactly as Bran had described. A cistern of true histories. With a whispered Dracarys, she scraped sap flecks from a vial and let them drip inside. They lit the shaft with warm gold. The thrum steadied, like a wounded animal soothed. Mist above brightened, allowing stray sunshafts to pierce. Missandei's face lit with quiet triumph, but Drogon rumbled warning. Sprite darted behind Daenerys. Out of the gloom slunk shapes, not wights, but pale slender beings with enormous obsidian eyes, clothed in lichen and bark armor. Children of the forest, survivors hidden even from Bran's sight. They carried no weapons, vines wrapped around their wrists, throbbing faintly. One stepped forward and spoke in clicks and sighs. Missandei listened, then translated. They ask why you feed fire to their well. Daenerys knelt, palms out. Fire bears truth, she said softly. I mend wounds left by the Night King's death. Missandei turned her words. The children murmured in chorus. The tallest touched Daenerys' forehead with a twig-thin hand. Visions flooded harder. Jon fighting water wraiths. Bran rowing with Mira south. Jon and Gendry scaling black cliffs, chased by shades of their own doubts. Tears stung Daenerys' eyes. She opened them to see the child withdraw and nod. They sang then, a keening whistle. Vines slid aside, revealing earthen jars capped with amber. The child placed one in Daenerys' hands. Seed song, Missandei interpreted. Plant where void bleeds. Roots will grow, drink truth. Weave nets that catch false futures. Daenerys bowed low. Thank you. Drogon rumbled purred. Sprite chirped. The children melted back into trunks. Mist sealed paths behind, but left a narrow corridor bathed in faint blue light, leading outward. Missandei exhaled awe. We carry a forest in a jar, she whispered. Then we must keep it unbroken. Daenerys secured the amber jar in dragon saddle netting. Next breach, we sing this into soil. Far north across ragged coasts, Jon, Gendry, and Tormund snaked through crevasses that knitted the frostfangs. Wind screamed like gulls. They reached cliffs overlooking the shivering sea. Frozen waves petrified mid-crash, towering as castles. At cliff base, a cave mouth exhaled warm vapor. Tormund's beard crusted white. Hot spring, he muttered. Inside, steam shimmered above black pools. Bioluminescent algae painted ceilings emerald. The walls pulsed faintly, as if veins carried molten rock. In the largest chamber stood petrified trees fused with basalt, roots tangled in glowing veins of dragon glass. Jon ran a hand over a trunk. Visions flickered. Giants forging clubs, children swirling magic, first men carving runes. The cave was a crypt of roots, fossilized yet awake. At the center lay a jagged chasm filled with molten stone. Liquid dragonfire simmered since the Dawn Age. Above it suspended a weave of crystalline roots, rainbows dancing across facets. Gendry whistled. Metal like I've never seen. Jon frowned. Not metal. Song made solid. He approached warily. The weave hummed a note that matched his heartbeat. When he recited truths, pledge, death, rebirth, the weave brightened, strands extending towards him, grafting to an old wound on his palm. Warmth flooded him, tinged with sorrow. The weave hardened, forming a slender rod of crystalline root, detachable. Jon lifted it. It felt alive, vibrating gentle as cat purr. Tormund eyed the magma. We best leave before the mountain decides to sing back. At the entrance, Ghost stiffened. Outside, void ice stains crept across the sea, freezing entire breakers in seconds. Black silhouettes lumbered. Frost whales stranded mid-breach, moaning. On approaching flows stood armored shapes, wielding tridents of ice. Not wights, their movements precise, deliberate. Gendry cursed. Drowned wizards? Jon narrowed eyes. Symbols carved on the ice tridents matched glyphs Euron's mad priests once wore. The deep calls. Jon murmured. The drowned dream of cold. Tormund hefted axe. Then we shatter dreams. They fought along the ice shelf as twilight painted auroras. Jon's crystalline rod sang when it cut, leaving trails of light that sealed cracks ice foes tried to open. Gendry's hammer shattered tridents. Tormund hurled foes into magma fissures where sea met mountain. Each time the rod touched void ice, veins turned white, then melted. As the last foe fell, waves of frozen brine shuddered and fell back, sea regaining flow. Jon thrust the rod deep into the ice at shoreline. It rooted instantly, branches spreading under sea like lightning. The water steamed green-gold, then cleared. Jon felt a tug, Daenerys' pulse, distant but sure. Her half of memory weaving worked. He whispered into wind, "Hold fast, my queen." A raven alighted nearby, eyes ink-black. Through it Bran spoke. One breach left. At King's Landing. Jon stiffened. The dragon pit? Beneath, Bran answered. Wildfire vaults cracked. Echoes of the Mad King's last dream leak into truth. Jon sheathed rod. We're coming. King's Landing lay warm in southern sun, but fissures of violet frost crept among cobblestones near the Red Keep. Citizens fled inland. Tyrion directed bucket lines with Davos, while Brienne evacuated orphanages. Bricks burst as green wildfire pooled with violet ice, neither flame nor frost extinguishing the other. Panic torches sparked, making things worse. Bells rang discordant. Daenerys and Drogon spiraled from the east gate. She clutched the amber jar. Missandei rode Sprite high above, smaller dragon weaving through smoke. Tyrion spotted them and bellowed relief before dodging an exploding barrel that launched purple shards. Daenerys landed at the dragon pit's cracked dome. The pit beneath seethed, wildfire barrels splitting, green flame licking beams, void ice dripping from cracks, freezing the fire mid-roar into statues of emerald and amethyst. She dismounted on a ledge trembling above abyss. Drogon clawed bricks aside to widen perch. Bran's ravens swarmed overhead, guiding her to a breach where purple frost knifed up through dragon skull debris. She pried the amber jar, uncorked it. Seed song glowed soft. She hummed the lullaby she'd sung to Drogon's egg the night of Khaleesi's pyre, but changed the words to those Missandei translated. Root remembers water, song mends marrow. She poured glowing sap onto the ice. It hissed, bore through frost, trailing vines in midair that wove nets, knitting wildfire and void ice together, neutralizing both. The floor stabilized, turning glassy. Above, Sprite flitted, scattering sparks of hatchling flame to seal smaller cracks. Then a roar darker than wildfire thundered below. From molten green depths rose a figure clad in cracked red armor, the Mad King's shade, eyes twin spirals of wildfire and void. Burn them all, it rasped, voice echoing centuries of whispered madness. It had no flesh, only smoke. Daenerys trembled. Drogon snarled but could not breathe. Smoke choked his throat. The shade advanced, arm outstretched. Daenerys clutched the jar, empty now. Song alone remained. She stepped forward. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, she shouted. Your dream is dust. I choose a different song. She began to sing. The lullaby. The chants of freedmen, the anthem Tyrion wrote for the pack. Each lyric carried truths. Her loves, her losses, Jon's hand, Viserions' sacrifice. The shade flickered, warping. It raised arms to cover ears that did not exist. Suddenly, Jon's voice joined, echoing from the shattered archway. He strode in, Gendry and Tormund, and Brienne behind. He carried the crystalline rod, now glowing amber to match vines. Their chorus swelled. A northern dirge, a free folk chant, a Baratheon smith's hammer rhythm on shield, knight's oaths. The seed song vines burst with light, climbing the shade, threading wildfire and void until the specter's form unraveled, collapsing into sparks that rained harmless green snow. Silence followed, broken only by distant cheers as Tyrion's crews saw flames die. Daenerys inhaled shakily. Jon crossed rubble to her, lifted her hand, and pressed his forehead to hers. "We closed the last breach," he whispered. Outside, the city bells tolled a new melody. Steady, uplifted, no longer funeral. Tyrion climbed the cracked dome, breathless, and surveyed calm streets glistening wet but not burning. 7, save me. We did it. Months later, fields from Dorne to the Wall sprouted crops earlier unseen, nourished by vines whose roots emanated from each sealed breach, threading unseen beneath soil, carrying memories hum. Rivers ran clear. Harbor fish returned in swarms, so thick nets burst. At Harrenhal, the council ratified the Charter of Roots and Flame, dedicating watchposts at every heart tree spring to monitor echo fissures and sing them shut should they stir. Children learned 2 anthems, one of winter's defeat, one of memory's weave. Sprite grew wide wings and flew at Drogon's side, black and jade against afternoon skies. Jon and Daenerys wed, in Winterfell's godswood, under boughs draped with weirwood leaves, and jars of seed song glowing soft. Bran officiated, voice resonant, while Sansa stood witness and Tyrion kept the chalice steady, though his hands shook with emotion and wine. Free folk and lords, Queensguard and unsullied, children ambassadors cloaked in moss all cheered as snowflakes drifted, warm, melting on skin. Late that night, Jon and Daenerys slipped beyond the castle to the same hill where once they'd watched stars. The air smelled of pine and fresh-turned earth. They lay beside Ghost and Sprite, looking at constellations newly bright. No menace prowled the dark horizon. Jon threaded fingers through hers. "Do you think the world will ever forget?" he asked softly. Daenerys turned, silver hair ghosting his cheek. "May it never," she whispered. "But if it tries, our roots will remember for it." He kissed her, tasting snow, and sap, and promise. Overhead, Drogon loosed a low, contented croon, echoed by Sprite's piping trill. In that chorus Jon heard the future, not frost or flame alone, but harmony woven of them both, singing of a dawn earned and guarded by truth. The night folded around their breath, carrying no shadows of what might have been, only the vast, steady pulse of what was, and what, together, they would keep. A.K. Nah. A restless hush clung to the pre-dawn sky, the kind of watchful stillness that makes even birds postpone their first songs, when a pair of riders came cantering up Winterfell's causeway in a spatter of half-frozen mud. The guards on the battlements had scarcely called down the welcome when Jon and Daenerys appeared in the gatehouse arch, both already armored beneath thick traveling furs, their faces raw with windburn, but bright with something fiercer than cold. News had arrived in the dead of night, a raven bearing the sigil of Old Town's new archmaester, sealed in pale blue wax. Ships sighted far out in the sunset sea, square-rigged giants with hulls, the color of bleached bone, sailing east at impossible speed, bow waves glittering with threads of violet frost. Long before the letter reached them, Jon had felt the tug, a pinprick behind the breastbone, the same subtle ache that had warned him of the white knife's poisoning and the dragon pit's crack. Daenerys felt it as a tightness in her throat, as though Drogon's roar had lodged there and could not be loosed. They knew the pattern now. Somewhere beyond sight, the void had found fresh rifts to worry, dredging up nightmares no memory net yet reached. Tyrion was waiting in the yard with Sansa and Bran. Torches gasped in the wind, scattering sparks over packed snow. The harbor watch at Fair Isle counted 11 masts before dawn. The hand reported, a roll of parchment trembling between 2 fingers. No banners, no colors, but they left a trail of half-frozen sea like glass behind them. The small folk whisper of ghost ships crewed by drowned whites. Sansa's tone was brisk, practical. "Lord Farman has sent for aid from Lannisport. If those ships turn south to the Fair Sea, they'll threaten every cobble merchant's lane from Casey to Old Town. But if they steer north..." She didn't finish. Her gaze drifted toward the shivering sea, and the memory of how easily the dead had poured through one breach. Bran's chair creaked as Mira wheeled him forward. His eyes were already far away, pupils filmed white by raven sight. The hulls bear sigils of krakens rendered in frost, he murmured, voice half dream. Their keels scar the waves with cold, yet beneath that ice throbs another song, an echo older than the drowned god, older than the children. It tastes of far Valyria before the doom, when sea worms sang in the deeps, and stone drank sorcery. Daenerys drew her cloak tighter. Valyrian echoes have stirred enough storms. Will not allow another. Jon spoke like a blade scraping free of its sheath. We ride to Fair Isle at once. If the ships land, they'll rupture coastlines the memory route hasn't reached. Tyrion's brows climbed. A week's hard ride in this weather? Quicker to sail down the fever. Too slow, Jon said. The ice those ships trail would freeze our sails before we rounded the rills. Sansa studied the wind, her breath drifting silver. Then you'll need wings. She glanced up toward the Godswood Ridge where Drogon roosted, his bulk a dark hill against paling sky, Sprite coiled beneath one tattered wing. Daenerys shook her head. Drogon can carry 2, not 4. And if he's aloft for days, the frost scars may split again. We need a ground host to follow. Bran blinked as color returned to his eyes. The isles beyond the Sunset Sea are dotted with hot vents that first men feared. Those vents exhale warmth drawn from the world's marrow. If your memory root can be planted in one, it will spread beneath the western waters like a braid of fire, netting any breach the ships might tear. Dawn. Tyrion rubbed his jaw. You speak of carrying live root across half a realm in the teeth of winter. We'd need greenhouses on wheels. We need a dragon saddle, Daenerys corrected. And one rider light enough to keep pace without burdening Drogon. She turned to Bran. Your eyes have traced all paths. Whom should we trust with the route? Bah. The three-eyed raven regarded Sprite, the young dragon now poking its snout over the Bailey wall. Curious. The route remains sensitive to new songs, Bran said softly. It should travel with one whose life still brims with unwritten verses, someone who has not yet fixed their path. Jon followed Bran's gaze to the training yard where Arya sparred with Gendry in slanting torchlight, their practice blades whistling. Sweat steamed from her hair, though the air was bitter. With each feint, she seemed to vanish and reappear, as fluid as ghost water. When Daenerys called her name, Arya lowered her guard but did not slow until Gendry pressed a final attack. She parried, twisted, disarmed him. The wooden sword clattered on flagstones. Only then did she jog over. Cheeks flushed. Another breach. Another, Jon answered. Ships on the western horizon. Her eyes flashed, excitement more than dread. At last. We've sat too long. Daenerys stepped close, holding Arya's gaze. I need you to carry the seed root Bran nurtured in the Rainwood. Drogon will bear you to Fair Isle. Once the fleet is burned or turned, you fly farther west. There are vents in those islands that breathe the earth's own fire. Plant the root in that hearth. Damn. Arya's lips curled in a grin. Fly a dragon? Sow a forest in the sea and return for supper? Sansa's worry cut through the levity. Those waters are uncharted. We might never fetch you back. I know my way home, Arya replied, softer now. She looked to Jon. Will you cover the coast while I'm gone? We ride with free folk and unsullied, Jon confirmed. Tormund's already saddling mammoth hides. Gendry fetched his hammer, jaw set. You'll need smiths to wedge dragonglass into the cliffs. I'll go. You'll keep your forge here, Arya countered, surprising him. If the storm reaches Winterfell, new spears will save more lives than your muscles on the coast. She squeezed his arm. Unspoken apology. Gendry swallowed anger and nodded. Bran produced the jar, now swaddled in moss. Veins of soft light pulsed through amber walls. Arya accepted it with reverence. Do not unstop her until the vent's breath wraps you, Bran warned. The air will carry the song deep. They launched at dawn's edge. Drogon hurled himself up in a grinding thunder of wings. Sprite clinging under his breastbone until thermals steadied them both. Arya sat before Daenerys, jar strapped against her stomach, needle across her back. The bite of winter wind stole her first breath, but she leaned into it, eyes stinging, elation coursing like molten silver. Below, Winterfell shrank to a snow-marbled sigil. The black water glittered faintly to the south. By midday, they cut across the ocean swells west of the Iron Islands. From that height, Arya saw plumes on the horizon. 11 bleached sails, just as the Raven had said. Each wake frothed violet, crusting waves as the hulls knifed forward. Drogon screamed and tucked into a dive. The distance fell away, wind shrieking past ridged horns. Daenerys shouted a Valyrian command. Sigils of frost krakens glimmered on the leading sail, and on deck shapes moved. Tall, gaunt faces chalk-pale beneath slick black beards. They wore breastplates quilled with ice shards that hissed when sea spray struck. Drogon's flame sprayed wide, but the first blast shattered into shards mid-air, as if hitting invisible glass. The spray fell into the sea, leaving scorched foam, but no split hull. Arya glimpsed runes chalked across the deck, circles within circles, arrowheads meeting points, the same glyphs that had haunted the water wraiths at the Isle of Faces. Someone below had twisted Memory Song into a shield. Daenerys wheeled high. Sprite darted under Drogon's wing, piping thin jets of fire. They slammed the shield at narrower angles, looking for seams. On the third pass, Arya spotted a pattern. Each rune carved on deck glowed violet, but 2 near the forecastle flashed dimmer, flickering like tired embers. "There!" she yelled over wind, pointing. Drogon banked. Sprite dipped, exhaling a lance of green-gold fire drawn from the seed root's glow. The blast punched between the 2 dim runes, and the shield faltered. Crackles raced across its surface like lightning, crawling a window. Drogon's next torrent hit bare mast. Flame roared over planks, igniting rigging, swallowing the sails in heartbeat. The hull's frost cracked, melted, boiled. Screams rose, human but hollow, as if their owners were only now realizing they had throats. The fleet reacted. Masts turned, oars churned. Some helmsmen tried to peel away. Others pressed forward, aiming to ram Drogon's too near the water. Arya felt Daenerys' legs tense behind her. The Dragon Queen handed over control with a quick squeeze. Her signal. Arya rose on her knees, jar secured, and steered Sprite's lethal darts, while Drogon hammered broad arcs of flame. One ship, desperate, loosed a ballista bolt of solid ice. It slammed into Drogon's left shoulder, throwing scales. He faltered but regained lift. Daenerys swore, voice raw. Blood seeped from the wound, steaming crimson. Arya bit her lip. They could destroy the fleet, but Drogon must survive to reach the vents. She scanned for the largest vessel, its figurehead a split kraken maw ringed with fangs. "Cut off the head," she muttered, and nudged Sprite. The hatchling zipped through rigging, dodging ice bolts. At mast-top, Arya vaulted onto a yardarm, bracing against the pitch and roar. She hurled 2 Valyrian daggers in quick succession, each blade buried into a flickering rune. The deck shield quaked, edges fraying. She dropped, rolling to absorb the fall, landed between sailors whose eyes glowed like deep-sea glass. They rushed with rusted cutlasses rimed in frost. Arya spun. Ducked. Steel rang. Sparks hissed against the deck's cold fire. She felt bruises blossom, but pressed through, driving toward the helm where a towering priest in coral armor chanted over the last bright rune. His skin was tattooed with maelstroms. His beard dripped seawater despite the fire. He raised a trident of frozen void, thrust. Arya caught the shaft between crossed blades. Chill shot up her arms. She slid aside, carving the wooden deck to disrupt his stance. The priest bellowed a half-glugged curse, but Drogon's shadow swept overhead. Flame cascaded. Arya hurled herself behind the helm post as green-gold torrent collided with void ice. A thunderclap erupted, lifting planks like kindling. When smoke cleared, the priest was ash sprayed across broken timbers. The final rune sputtered out. The shield around the fleet collapsed in shimmering shards like glass dust. Dragonfire raked the next vessel, Its frosted hull melted to slag, then steam. The entire armada convulsed under sudden ordinary flame. Some ships tried fleeing west. Others died still turning. Arya sprinted along decks, falling apart under her boots until Sprite swooped to snatch her. She clambered onto his back, clung as the hatchling labored skyward. Below, Drogon circled once more, searing wrecks so none revived. Then the great dragon veered toward the glittering horizon, toward the uncharted islands, where vents breathed ancient heat. Daenerys guided him, but her posture sagged. Blood glistened down flank ridges. Arya shouted into wind, "Land him! Bind the wound!" But Daenerys shook her head. "We finished the song first." She pointed west. The sun was near setting when they sighted a ring of jagged isles jutting from obsidian reefs. Vents hissed from cracks, each pulse sending columns of steam tinted with faint violet. Here then. Dropping through eddies of sulfur, Drogon landed on a shelf of volcanic glass. Arya dismounted Sprite beside him and unslung the glowing jar. Daenerys slumped against Drogon's foreleg. The bolt, still buried in his scales, pulsed a sickly indigo, where ice met flesh. Arya knelt. "I'll plant, you pull." She chose a fissure where steam rose in steady draft. Uncorking the jar, she upended its contents. Amber sap shot through with opalescent root strands slid into the crack, sizzling, releasing a hum like flutes. The fissure widened, accepting the root. Vines sprouted instantly, questing into the vent's breath. They fissured sideways, probing rock, weaving, glowing. Arya felt their pulse echo beneath her soles. Meanwhile, Daenerys braced her feet, seized the icicle bolt. Frost climbed her gloves, biting skin even through fur. With a guttural cry, she wrenched. The shard tore free, trailing a streamer of void mist. Drogon roared agony. His exhalation blasted a trench in the sand. Daenerys hurled the shard into the vent where sap vines caught it, encasing the void in living amber. The mist shrieked. Then the vent roared louder, exhaling green-gold fire that consumed the shard whole. A shudder ran through the aisle. Vents along the ridge flared brighter, shifting from violet to warm amber. Overhead, clouds lit from within, painting the sky in dawn hues, though night approached. Drogon's wound scabbed under a crust of sap that hardened to scale like plates. He heaved, breathed easier. Arya staggered beside the root, watching vines weave nets over the shoreline. Each new tendril trailed memory song. She heard snatches of Bran's voice, Joan's vows, children laughing in Winter Town. The sea's violet veins faded, replaced by ordinary froth. Daenerys leaned against Arya, both panting. "Now," the queen whispered, "we go home." Joan's host reached Fair Isle the next day, to find only burned spars washing ashore. Hulls no larger than splintered ribs. Drogon's handiwork. Waves lapped clean and cold, no purple sheen. Jon closed his eyes, relief washing through. He felt Daenerys' pulse flicker warm. Steady, far west. Tormund punched his shoulder. "Your woman's flame outpaced our legs again." "Never doubted," Jon said, and the grin that opened on his face felt like sunlight after prison. They spent 2 days checking villages for signs of frost taint, but fishermen reported only plentiful cod and oddly glowing kelp that crumbled to harmless ash when dried. Whatever poison the fleet carried was gone. When Jon returned northward, ravens told him Sprite had grown another handspan of wing in only a week, as though the root song quickened dragon flesh too. In White Harbor, new trade ships from Bravos arrived bearing offers of amber sap in exchange for grain. Word of living memory trees had already crossed narrow seas. Old Town's Archmaester dispatched scholars to study vents and roots, writing of a new field they called Memoria forming. Samwell Tarly, acting Grand Maester of the Pact Council, argued its ethics day and night, whether men might tilt memories to their desires. Jon admitted such power worried him more than dead sailors. Yet Bran's counsel remained. Truth must be tended, not twisted. The root listens. It refuses lies. Years unfolded like well-bound volumes on a shelf, each bearing scars of the last yet gilt with unlikely hope. The Pax Council chambers moved to River Run for centrality. Tyrion gave up the Hands Chain to Brienne and accepted stewardship of a growing university dedicated to dreamsong and dragonglass metallurgy. Sansa, crowned Lady Protector of the North, turned Wintertown into a flourishing free port linked by canals, warmed by root pyres, green glass tubes carrying hot currents under ice. Free folk and Northmen mingled, trading furs for amber slips that glowed with snippets of remembered story, now a favored gift at naming days. Arya returned after 3 turns of the moon. Skin tanned, hair bleached salt white. At the ends, she spoke little of the uncharted archipelago beyond the Vent Isle, only that great white trees the width of towers grew on black sand, leaves silver as mirrors. She carried a shell full of whistling holes. When the wind blew through it, children swore they heard dragons singing. Gendry forged her a circlet shaped like the spinning compass of her long sea voyages. They wed on the deck of the first memory root ship, its hull carved from weirwood grown over deep-sea vents, pliant yet harder than oak. When she kissed him, the ship hummed, recording the moment in living grain. Daenerys and Jon spent each spring touring the realm astride Drogon, now fully healed though patterned forever by sap armor like veins of gold. Sprite, nearing the size Viserion had once been, served purely as ambassador, landing in markets so children might stroke a wing, learn that dragons need not mean fire. In the 5th year, word reached the council of a southern desert tribe whose wells had turned to glass overnight, reflecting futures instead of faces. Jon, Daenerys, Bran, and Arya prepared at once. They no longer dreaded such summons. They carried nets of song in their packs, roots wrapped in moss, truth enough to mend whatever void still dared. Before they left, Jon stood again on Winterfell's rampart in pre-dawn stillness. Snow fell like feathers, soft and harmless. He watched Ghost stalk the yard below, grier now but no less fierce, and listened to the hum of roots beneath stone. For the first time in all his years, he felt not the anticipation of battle, but the surety of guardianship, as though he were a tree himself, grown deep, branches ready to shelter, but no longer shaking in the gale. Daenerys joined him, slipping a hand into his. North and east, the sky paled. Soon Sprite would trumpet impatience, Drogon would unfurl his vast shadow, and they would be off to tend another fracture in the world's long, living story. But for this breath, quiet reigned. She rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever wonder how the song will end? Jon thought of vows whispered in crypts, of daggers and roots and dragons, and the sea that once tried to turn to ice. He looked at the horizon where dawn wrote its first lines of fire. I don't, he said at last, voice low, because we'll be there to write the next verse. Below, the godswood rustled, leaves murmuring assent. Roots deepened, memories wove, and the rippled tapestry that was mankind's tomorrow stretched farther than any map, carried on dragon wings, anchored by truth, defended by hearts that refused to forget. K-A-G. The dawn air above Winterfell tasted of cinder and frost when the nef of the rousing dawn tilted southward, its memory wood hull humming to the pulse of the roots, braided through its keel. Jon felt those pulses, faint thrums that matched the cadence of his heart, as he stood at the forecastle rail beside Daenerys and watched the gray banks of the White Knife recede into muffling fog. Sprite cut lazy circles overhead, wing tips skittering over mist like a skipping stone, while Drogon soared far higher, a smudge of shadow against the paling edge of the sky. Below decks, the cog's living planks whispered snatches of remembered tales. Children laughing in the godswood, Arya's shell flute trilling on a summer night, the low oath Tyrion muttered when he signed away the Hands Chain. Those echoes would accompany them across half a kingdom toward the deserts of southern Dorne, where the sandship wells had turned to mirror glass and visions already had driven shepherd folk to madness. By second bell, Bran emerged from the hold on Mira's arm, his face drawn thin as vellum. Ravens circled the mast once, then drifted south, guided by something only the three-eyed raven sensed. Arya appeared moments later from the galley deck, wiping salt from her brow with a kerchief that smelled of black pepper and engine grease. She had been helping the Roynish artificers tune the root organ, an array of resin pipes that whined through sap-lined chambers to keep the hull balanced against storms. Her grin faltered when she glimpsed Bran's pallor. "Worse." He nodded, eyes milky. "The well song flickers faster now, as if each mirrored surface multiplies possibilities. Some of those futures are sick with rot." He focused on Arya only once the glaze cleared from his gaze. "See that the organ's valves stay ajar. The root must keep listening or she'll choke on echoes." She flicked his shoulder like an older sister indulging a precocious younger brother. "Worry about your own breath, little bird king." Then she bounded off to the quarterdeck, where Gendry hammered rivets around a new catapult cup, washed in dragonglass dust. Their laughter nodded above the creak of rigging. Jon exhaled into knitted gloves. Despite the uneasy mission, all felt strangely alive. Wind snapping banners of wolf and dragon, planks thrumming, sap glow warming portholes, and yet a splinter of dread lodged beneath every heartbeat. "He weakens," he murmured to Daenerys as Bran turned away. "Each breach drains him harder." She brushed a stray silver hair from her cheek, eyes following Sprite's loop. "Then we close this one quickly. Let Bran rest in living memory rather than drown in futures." She gazed south, where sunlight broke clouds in molten streaks. "But the desert is older than any story we've mended. The sands remember nothing. They bury the past beneath new dunes each storm. Root song may find no anchor at all." Neddy. Jon recalled the red waste east of Pentos, how tracks vanished between dawn and dusk. "Then we plant anchors ourselves." He reached for her hand, gloved fingers interlacing. A spark jumped, either static from dry winter air or something older, the same subtle link that hummed whenever their aims aligned too perfectly to name coincidence. He squeezed, and felt her resolve harden like tempered steel. 3 days' voyage brought them to the mouth of the Torrentine, where the river spilled into the summer sea in ribbons of copper sand. Dornish outriders awaited on the bluff, orange cloaks whipping like candle flames. They saluted with curved spears as the rousing dawn dropped sail and took the tide to shore. Princess Alterys Sand, Oberyn's grandniece, and the newly elected voice of Sunspear, had ridden from Hellholt with the best part of 400 lancers. She greeted Daenerys by clasping both forearms, an equal's embrace, and addressed Jon as Stark of Songs, a title that made him flush. "Our wells dream nightmares," she said without preamble. "Shepherds drink visions and wander into the dunes. The water leaves their skins, but not their heads. They babble verses in tongues older than Royne, and then fall still, statues of glass inside." She shivered despite the heat shimmering off the dunes like forged breath. "It takes 3 men to lift them without shattering." Bran, propped in his saddle chair atop a placid Roundsey, listened with eyes half shut. "Dreamstone petrification," he murmured. "The void coaxing bodies to mimic wells." Alterys flinched at his calm tone. Bran added, "If we do nothing, the sandship caravan routes will freeze into rugs of crystal that fracture under wind. Dorne herself will bleed cut glass." Then, as though noticing her discomfort, he offered a wan smile. "But we've unmade such wounds before." That afternoon they set out, leaving the ship at anchor. Drogon and Sprite shadowed overhead while Dornish lancers kicked up plumes of dust that glimmered with motes of violet visible only when the sun struck a certain angle. Arya rode scout with a handful of sand skimmers, fin-keeled sleds pulled by scaled goats bred to endure scorching gusts. Gendry stayed on the Dawn overseeing ballast. The hull would gradually grow new roots after they departed, absorbing local soil until ready to sail upriver with refugees should the worst erupt. Travel south-southeast across shifting dunes proved maddening. Compasses twitched, stars blurred at night, and each sunrise seemed to break from a slightly different quadrant of the horizon. Bran explained that mirrored wells refracted geometry itself. They would reach their destination only by listening to the well's faint chime in the wind. Those chimes at first sounded like distant glass wind bells, but by the 3rd night, even Jon heard them. Thin notes curling through canvas, promising other lives where choices tilted left not right. He dreamt of sitting an iron throne of sapwood, while snowmelt flooded King's Landing. He woke sweating beneath furs, though the desert froze outside. On the morning of the fourth day, their outriders returned white-faced. "Mirrors ahead," one rasped, throat thick with thirst unslaked. None dared draw water from the skins for fear they too might petrify. Arya reported that the sand crest beyond the horizon gleamed hard as diamond, sunlight fracturing into rainbow spears. Drogon, circling, refused to fly lower than 1,000 feet, roaring each time drafts pressed him landward. At noon they breached the ridge and saw the sandship oasis, once a valley of deep wells and linen tents, now a basin paved in glass. Wells stood frozen mid-spray, water tunnels turned into transparent spires. Camels, men, even hardy sand lizards curled perfect as sculptures around the rims, each feature affixed beneath a clear glaze that caught the sun and sent knives of light into the sky. In the center of the basin yawned the main well, now a black mirror that rippled though no wind crossed its surface. Within its reflection danced silhouettes, versions of themselves arriving, leaving, dying, ruling. When Arya stepped near, her reflection split into 10, each wearing a different face she might have stolen. She recoiled. Bran ordered all to halt outside the basin. "The void lies within that mirror," he said. "It steals the water's memory, then folds new futures into each droplet. Break the mirror, and the void becomes 1,000 shards, each birthing its own song of ruin." He looked to Jon and Daenerys. "We must sing it shut, but unlike rivers or vents, sand has no roots to latch upon. We need water's memory, unstolen, to feed the seed." He tapped a leather satchel at his side. "I carried a flask from the Isle of Faces, water wept from a heart tree's bark. It holds the truest past. Mix it with the rainwood root, pour both into the black well. The mirror will be forced to recall only what truly was, not what might be." Daenerys traced the basin's perimeter with her gaze. "Its glare will blind anyone who steps inside. The glass statues will shatter at a breath. We need stealth, speed." Her eyes fell on Arya naturally, and on Alterys. "I'll go down alone," Arya said, anticipation cold bright in her tone. "I can cross the plinths without ringing a pebble." She turned to Alterys. "Guide me to the rim, then you pull your men back." Jon objected but knew the futility. Instead, he insisted on joining Bran's ritual chant from a safe distance, singing the wellstone to sleep as Arya worked. Bran taught Jon the syllables, an ancient first tongue phrase meaning bone of water, heart of sand, dream in roots. They practiced until the words bent Jon's accent into something feral and throaty. Daenerys would weave her Valyrian undertones over that chant, while Drogon circled high, ready if the void tried to exit by wind. As twilight reddened the dunes, Arya slipped across the glass field. Her boots were wrapped in lamb's wool and oiled linen so even the thin clink of soft leather would dampen. She carried 2 vials, heart tree water and seed root, each glowing faintly. At first the silence felt vast, but halfway to the mirror she heard whispers, soft pleadings of statues begging to be shattered, each offering glimpses of happiness if freed. A shepherd promising to teach her songs, a camel boasting of buried ruby hoards. She stuffed wax in her ears and pressed on. Jon began the chant. His voice was low, rough as a blacksmith's rasp at first, but steady. After 2 stanzas, Daenerys joined, her tones soaring, blending like bronze over iron. The dunes vibrated. Alterys and her lancers knelt, spears planted butt down. Steam puffed from vents beneath the glass, as though the basin itself pulsed with breath. Bran remained silent, eyes white and body shaking. He was inside ravens swooping over the well, mapping cracks and risk, feeding Jon images through subtle nods. When Arya reached the rim, her own reflection sprawled in 1,000 shards across the dark mirror. Some versions mocked her, others wept. She uncorked the heart tree water. The reflection's mouth stretched. Screaming, soundlessly, she let a single drop fall. It hit the surface, sending white ripples across black. Instantly, the air around her thickened. Visions clawed at her memories. Her father's execution, Gendry's near death by fever, even a future where she stabbed Jon to claim a northern crown. She nearly reeled. But then Jon's chant strengthened, Daenerys' voice soaring, covering her like a cloak. Arya gritted teeth, poured the rest of the flask, then followed with the seed root. Amber strands hissed, melting through black glass, threading downward as though chasing an invisible vein. The well convulsed. Statues lining the basin cracked, cries like shattering bells ringing out. Some fragments flew, slicing air, but still Jon and Daenerys sang. Drogon shrieked overhead. Sprite dived to flank him, adding a young dragon's high keen. The third harmony Bran said would lock the mirror. The heart tree water turned the well silver into milky swirl. The root's glow spread until the dark center blushed gold. At the rim, Arya felt scalding wind. She leapt backward as the mirror surface convulsed a final time, then froze to opaque white glass. Threads of root etched across, efflorescing like frost ferns. Silence swallowed the desert. No wind, no whispers, only Jon's chant tapering into hush. He exhaled, shaking. Daenerys' eyes glistened. The final vibration hummed through ribs. Bran slumped, Mira catching him. Altares blinked as if waking from dream. Arya returned, shards crunching under now safe steps. She held the empty vial high. "Done," she called. But the desert did not breathe. Instead, a single note somewhere deep resonated. A throatier, older octave. Bran's eyes snapped open. "Beneath," he rasped. The void retreats but claws through bedrock. A sink of dreamstone far under dune. It will birth again unless sealed. He pointed at Drogon's silhouette. Only molten root glass can fuse that pocket. We must carve a vent and let dragonfire bake the seed. Jon turned to Daenerys, fear flaring. That wound almost killed Drogon at the vent aisle. She swallowed, hand smoothing the sap scar on Drogon's shoulder that glimmered where scales parted. "We must risk it." She climbed to Drogon's back, eyes never leaving Jon. "Your voice guided Arya. Guide me now." He ascended Sprite, though the hatchling bucked at the heat shimmering off dunes. Hovering, they waited as Bran hummed a different pitch, one that made the sealed mirror hum in answer. Cracks formed in a perfect circle, as if an unseen augur cord the playa. Steam exhaled. Drogon descended and perched astride the fracture. Daenerys closed her eyes, laid both palms on his neck, whispering Dracarys not as command, but as prayer. Drogon opened jaws. A tight plume of green-gold flame jetted directly into the borehole. The root glass softened, then dripped molten. Wind howled from the vent, as if desert coughed. The air turned copper. Sprite flapped, uneasy, but held by Jon's calming hand. Suddenly, a tongue of black void shot upward. Liquid night, seeking sky. Drogon's flame met it head-on. Void and fire clashed, roared. Jon felt something snap between his ribs. Daenerys reeled, gripping horn ridges. For an eternal blink void frost spread across Drogon's muzzle. Jon's heart seized. Memories of Viserion falling stabbed him anew. But the sap scar along Drogon's shoulder flared, channeling root song fire from within. Gold raced veins under his skin, melting frost. With a shattering clang like temple bells colliding, the void tongue fractured, rained obsidian dust. The borehole sealed under a crust of red-hot amber glass. Drogon staggered back, wings tipping but remained airborne. Only then did the ground settle. Heat haze shimmered where the mirror had lain, now an opaque plate of fused root glass dull as pottery under moonlight. Steam vented once and subsided. Arya jogged to Jon's landing point. He slid from Sprite, adrenaline shaking his legs. Daenerys dismounted Drogon with care, leaning on Jon wordlessly. Their breaths steamed, though night air was warm. Exhaustion and shock in equal measure. Bran directed Altaris lancers to erect stone cairns around the cooling plate, warning no one to dig or well here again. The Dornish princess knelt, pressing palm to fused glass. "It's warm as living skin," she whispered. "A desert's new heart." When she rose, Tears traced salt paths on her face. Mourning lost kin, but also relief that the wound had closed without burning her homeland to the roots. They camped that night beyond the basin. The desert sky dazzled with stars undimmed by mirage. Arya surprised them by whistling through the shell she'd carried from the vent aisles, the notes drifting like gull cries over sand. Drogon slept, smoke puffing rhythmic pulls. Sprite nested under his father's wing, smaller body glowing faint where flame had reflected. Jon sat beside Daenerys, and Bran near a small root-fed brazier. Bran sipped water quietly, color returning. At last he spoke. "The deeper we mend, the older the harms we rouse," he said. "This void rose from an age when dragons were song and oceans drank moonlight. Each patch we lay sings the world tighter, truer, but also louder." "Someday even little lies will scream." Daenerys stared into the brazier. "Then we teach truth early, so lies never learn to whisper." She rubbed her forearm where a tiny root scar still bloomed. No rule stronger than memory. Jon nodded but glanced over desert, still uneasy. "We close rifts after they open. But what births them? Who stirs void song? The drowned priests, the frost fleet. Someone guides them." Bran's gaze drifted north, past dunes, past mountains, into realms only his ravens saw. A hand darker than night conceals itself between realms. Not a person, not exactly. More an intention too fearful to die with its makers. The same fear that first forged others, that taught Valyrians to bind fire. It lives in unmade possibilities. He closed his eyes, fatigue swamping features. "But I saw a thread. It coils west of Ashai, in the shadow of the world, waiting." Daenerys' shoulders squared. "Then, after rest, we sail east." Jon met her eyes, no need for words. They returned to the Torrentine amid cheers, though all felt subdued. Bran's health waned, each vision left him more fragile. He confessed to Mira that roots cradled him, yet parts of his mind lingered in futures he could not share. Mira pleaded for him to remain at the Isle of Faces to convalesce. Bran agreed on one condition. Jon and Daenerys would continue east to pierce the Shadow's veil, carrying Arya and Sprite, plus Tyrion for counsel. Gendry, grieving to be left again, swore to forge a fleet of rootcraft to follow once Bran confirmed the path. In Sunspear, Tyrion rejoined them, complaining about desert fleas and poetic strings, only half serious. He carried scrolls of Ashai legends, maps of the Grey Waste beyond Lang, and one peculiar artifact sent by Samwell, a black glass lens that, when held to starlight, revealed faint root veins in sky, hinting the heavens too bore memory lines. The rousing dawn refitted with fresh sprouts grown from desert soil, her hull now glinting faintly with sand-glass patterns. She carried in her cargo hold 10 sealed casks of heart-tree water, 6 jars of seed root, and a stone chest bound with dragon-glass clasps. Inside rested the last shard of void ice Drogon had expelled, now dormant but kept for study. On the eve of departure, Jon visited the fused mirror plate one last time. It lay under starlight, dull, silent. Yet when he knelt, a faint image swam up. Not a false future, but the reflection of his present face, lined by duty yet softer than in years past. He touched the glass. It was cool now, solid, not unlike ordinary stone. He whispered a vow that whatever shadow awaited beyond the known world, he would face it rooted in this unbreakable present. Dawn rose coral and fierce. Drogon launched first, his healed scales catching sunrise in fiery tessellations. Sprite followed, chirping exultation. The rousing dawn raised her living sails, sap fibers unfurling to drink wind. Arya climbed the bowsprits, scanning east with bright hunger. Tyrion uncorked a jar of arbor gold on the quarterdeck and toasted to the cartographers of tomorrow. Daenerys leaned beside Jon at the helm, her hand finding his without effort. Their silhouettes etched against horizon, wolf and dragon, as summer sea's vast mirror swallowed them. Beyond chart and legend, toward the place where shadows conceived nightmares, and where, together, they meant to teach those shadows the light of living song. Behind them, the sands of Dorne whispered over glass, burying the last shards of false futures in dunes that would one day birth oses of unimagined bloom. The world exhaled, not in final peace, but in promise. Every breath a stanza yet to be written, every heartbeat a drum for the next great weaving of fire, root, and memory.